talk about chapter 18, The Infinite Vine. So, when it comes to the music for this song, it was, I want to say, the second one that I started working on, and uh, pretty much the second one that I finished pretty much everything for other than the drums. Um, so that means like I started working on this probably around the time when my mentor passed away, like in early 2017. And the reason why I chose to work on this one first was because I had all the music already written for it long before I even had the idea for the album. Um, this somewhere on my hard drive with a bunch of music and everything, I have, I guess, what you would call an early demo of it from like somewhere 2007 to 2010. I honestly don't remember exactly when I wrote it. I just know it was probably in those span of a few years. Um, and, I think all I wrote for it were, well, just the guitar parts, and recorded it on probably, I think it's called Sonar or Soundforge. It might actually be the same one, company, whatever. Um, Basically, one of my old roommates in college gave me some pirated uh, software to record with, circa 2005 ish. Um, and yeah, I had written and recorded, like the basis for this song. Really, I didn't change anything about it at all, like whatsoever. Um, so yeah, I mean, it had been sitting for a long time, and knowing that, hey, I'm going to be writing 20 songs or whatever, and it was just came down to, well, I've already got this one, so that would be less that I would have to write, you know, maybe save me a little bit of time, and that was the basis for the music of this song. Um, I can't say that like the second half of the song's kind of drony and not as much going on with it, but I like the sound of it because what I did, I mean, even back then, I don't know, 13, 14 years ago, was uh, fade in some delay effects once that section comes. And a reason for that was like, I just thought it sounded cool. Like back then, recorded two guitar parts, hard pan to the left, hard pan to the right, respectively. And like the delays kind of compete against each other, which, most serious musicians will say, oh, you never want delays competing against each other. But that's exactly what I wanted. I thought it sounded cool that way. And like in the original demo version from all those years ago, like you can really hear, like when I start palm muting and hitting this chord, like you can really hear just how it starts competing, you know, in the left and right speakers, and it just that's what makes it sound so cool to me. Um, so yeah, it's an old song, but I was lazy, I guess, if you want to say that. But I mean, I think it's a good song too. You know, I was convinced up until recently that this was going to be the best song on the entire album. Um, that's honestly what I thought. Um, but I'll get into that in shortly. Um, well, I might as well go on and get into it. Um, the reason why I think this song falls short is the end. See, like once it gets to that like delayed guitar section, the timing gets off, which, now it's like, well, why didn't you just re-record that stuff? Well, because this is stuff I had worked on 5 years ago. Like pretty much around the time of me like posting this video, I was already starting to work on this song. If I was to go back and re-record the guitars, then I've got to re-record the bass because the bass will be off too, and then I'll probably have to re-record the vocals as well for that ending section. Either that or just, I don't know, quantize the hell out of it. And sorry, I just, nah, didn't want to do it. So I don't know, like maybe it works. Um, Trying to do the drums for it, I just kept listening to it and it just wanted to pull my hair out because I'm like, this isn't exactly on time at all. And I'm having to try to compensate for it. But it got to the place where I wasn't even sure how to compensate. So what I ended up doing was I had the idea of, well, I could put some like more reverb, like basically raise the reverb levels on the kick drum and the snare, and then do some like crazy delay on the cymbals or echo or some kind of extra effect to just make it spacier, I suppose. And my theory was, hey, it'll kind of fit what's going on with the guitars. And I think it works well enough, but you can be the judge of that. If I if I was recording this now, yeah, I would easily fix the whole thing and just not exactly start from scratch, but I would be able to, go on and do the drums for it. Basically have a scratch track for a guitar, then do the drums, and then pretty much record everything else from there, because now I've pretty much figured out exactly what I need to do to make solid drums. Um, like it's kind of come to a science at this point, and gosh, I wish I knew what I know now a year ago because I would have saved myself literally months of time. Um, like hands down, like the process is just in like the last month has just gotten like that. It's pretty amazing actually. And I wish I knew what I was doing a year ago when I was, working on these drum parts, but it was just a lot of quantization and a lot of trial and error really. So I think it turned out well enough, but like I said, you can be the judge of it, and I'll just leave it with that. But let's talk about the meaning of the lyrics to the song. So where we left off in chapter 17, he's the protagonist is in front of a firing squad, um, literally staring down the barrel of, well, a few guns, I would suppose, at least a few. Um, and I like to think that there are three distinct persons or groups of people who are present for this, and that being the like soldiers being the first group, of course, holding guns up towards him. Um, Sorry, my computer kind of froze up for some reason. It's doing something weird. I'm gonna have to pause. Settled. So back to what I was saying. You know, staring down the barrel of the gun, and there's three groups. Like I said, the soldiers. The second one I think is Aurora, the bride, whatever. Um, just this single lady who's standing there watching. And then the third would be basically the villagers, or, you know, even some of the minor characters that have kind of come up, um, you know, through this narrative so far. So, yeah, three groups. And then, of course, the protagonist himself being the fourth person or group or whatever you want to call it. Um, so, with that being said, the following three songs, 18, 19, and 20, are in the context of this scene in front of the firing squad. And so, what happens at this point, it's like, okay, the scriptural uh, prophecy, top of my head, Isaiah. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is upon me, sort of thing. Because he has anointed me to preach good news to the poor, etc., etc. That's what has happened to the protagonist. Um, the Holy Spirit's come upon him, and yeah, he's speaking and everything, and he's talking to the other three groups other than himself, which I guess it could include himself as well. But he's speaking basically the words of God to these three distinct people, three distinct groups. And each song is kind of towards one of them. But at the same time, I kind of think of it as they're all kind of a similar message or a similar principle in at the very foundation of it. So essentially, the very foundation is God's love. Um, and so, like, all three songs are different aspects or different contexts of that love towards these people. And so, which one is chapter 18 addressing? I'm honestly not sure. Um, it attribute whichever of the three he's talking to. It doesn't bother me. I'd like to think he's talking specifically to the villagers in this one. That kind of makes the most sense, at least in my mind. But the bottom line is it's all kind of interchangeable. Um, each song could be addressed to any of the three groups of people present. And also, even, hey, to himself, let's say. I mean, why not? You know? So, the Infinite Vine, lyrically, I think it literally started with the phrase infinite vine, and basing it off of Jesus' own words of, you know, I am the vine, you are the branches. It was something that just kind of came to me one night, probably at work, and just, I don't know, kind of meditating or contemplating, basically thinking about this concept of, well, if he's the vine, then, and he's God, and that therefore means he's infinite, and then the vine is, you see where I'm going with that. Um, and just the idea of this infinite vine. I don't know how else to eloquently put it other than that. It was just something that kind of struck me. And so then going into the vine metaphor, um, that, okay, we're often talking about vines producing fruit, grapes, or whatever, which, is made into wine. Um, I mean, that's many different places in the Bible as well. This talk of, wine as a metaphor. And so the whole song is basically that. So it says, at the very beginning, my love's greater than the finest wines. To your palate, I speak to taste and see how I'm good. So we're talking Jesus' very words, taste and see how I'm good, sort of thing. Um, and like the first chorus, if you will, is me just like screaming at the top of my lungs, I was the one to graft you into the infinite vine. Which, by the way, my scream in that section, I'm like, it's solid. Like, I'll pat myself on the back, like, I know that sounds funny, but getting a good scream takes, like, yeah, it is sometimes like I listen back to some of my screams and I'm like, that doesn't sound as good, but that one I'm like, yeah, that was solid, so I'm not complaining. Um, then like the second verse is, so why did you trade new for old wineskins? Back to biblical imagery, of course. Bread, juice, and nutrients were given, life flow from unseen roots. So like even like bread and juice, the Eucharist. Okay. Um, so to kind of make this short, um, I yeah continually use fruit language. I mean, even talking, there's like fig wines and stuff like that. Um, from lonely pulp to fig clusters to my darling one, which, the cursing of the fig tree. Um, I remember hearing a sermon, like a really good sermon, interesting one, um, years ago, that was making the argument that the fig tree, fig leaves, all that sort of thing, um, actually symbolizes basically man-made religion, um, instead of what like a lot of evangelicals these days use the language of, well, it's not religion, it's relationship, and sort of basing it off that instead of having like a relationship with God, that like the fig leaves, fig trees, all that stuff represents trying to cover oneself to hide from God, and that's essentially what religion does. And so it's kind of what I'm talking about there, from lonely pulp to fig clusters to my darling one, so that there's like a progression of, um, going from dead religion to a darling one, which I have to point out there is, um, I specifically use the word WON as kind of a play on words. That it's, as I've heard many people say in the past, that, we have to be one uh, to Christ. So that was, why I wrote it that way. And then it says from there, yet all you want of me, Jesus speaking, is an image hung from a tree, question mark. Is, by no means do I ever want to diminish the cross, okay? But I do think at the same time, a lot of people get stuck on just the cross. But what makes the cross what it is the resurrection. And so I think many, maybe subconsciously in the back of their heads, and maybe I can only say this because, like, when I was younger, this was kind of the image of, well, you try to picture Jesus um, in your head, or, say you close your eyes at church or during music, and you try to like focus on some kind of imagery. Um, and it just goes back to the cross. Not saying that's a bad thing, but I am saying, like, at some point need to, you know, kind of stop seeing that and see the risen Lord, if that makes sense. See, him coming out of the tomb, him like phasing through the walls, to like, you know, be like, hey, Thomas, do you believe now? Sort of thing, that sort of image of a risen Lord, of an ascending Lord that's, like raising up in the sky, sort of thing. At the ascension. Um, but um, what else can I say? Okay, so like towards the end, there's this kind of spoken word section where I'm kind of lightly singing in the background, and I like put some crazy effects on it to make it all spacey and stuff. But it says, "You'll think this another rebuke. Aren't you a sinner in the hands of an angry, vengeful God with soul held above hell?" Which, some people out there will know what I'm referencing. That famous sermon. Uh, yeah, I'm sorry. Like, I know y'all don't like the term neo Calvinists or whatever. Um, it just never made sense to me, to constantly, forever, see yourself as just a sinner in the hands of an angry God, sort of thing. Like, at some point, that, like, even if you do believe in, the tulip sort of thing, um, I just don't think it's healthy to stay there, even if that is what you believe, if that makes sense. That there needs to be progression from there. But maybe that's just me. Anyway, it says, all I wanted was for you to accept your first love and mirror me, which I remember hearing, I guess, a teaching years ago, that was saying, like the Bible talks about, this group of people. I can't remember which church it was, in Revelation. Yeah, losing their first love or forgetting their first love, and um, anyway, I heard someone explain that what this first love actually should be referring to, how we should view it, is the recognition that he first loved us, and that's the first love. It's not like, oh, I've got to put him first above every freaking thing, and just uh, try to achieve that goal, or whatever. It's no, it's realizing that he first loved you, and that's the first love. And so that's what I was even, you know referring to there, and saying, in mirror me. I'm not the whiner you believe me to be, I made a wine for you. Play on words there. How long will you sing a refrain, a psalm of love, when only singing from your flesh masqueraded as spirit? Um, so even that is saying, like, when are you going to get real? Because I think, and I'm saying this even of myself, like, oh, well, think that we're singing some kind of spiritual song, but really it's just coming from flesh. It's not like you're actually worshiping in spirit and truth, right? Um, so the end is just saying, when will you taste and see that all I've ever had is love for you, my muscadine, grafted into my infinite vine? Um, the very last line really kind of just sums everything up, if you ask me. It says, my love's greater than the greatest wines, but when will you reject your prohibition? Um, and I think that fits with a lot of like the Pentecostal language that I've grown up and am still around. It's just another way of saying it. Like, when are you going to actually taste? And I want to point out that this is this isn't like an evangelistic song, because I know that like there's potentially like atheists watching this. And like I hope that what I'm saying here, I guess will evangelize, if you want to call it that, that it'll be a good example of what I believe Christianity has always been, and is what it should appear as, um, of God's love. Um, but this is actually directed towards Christians, fellow Christians like myself. Um, yeah, this isn't an evangelistic song. He's speaking to villagers who would say that they believe the same thing as he does. So I have to point that out, that, you know, sure, I would like this song to, really be a good example to those who don't believe. But ultimately, he's trying to remind people who say they believe, um, these foundational truths of God's love.